Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of Cover One Buffalo. Uh, with me as always, my buddy Nate Geary, man. How you doing, Nate?
I'm good. I'm gonna take a shot at Eric though because he in our group chat, which we have a Slack channel, and if you folks are on the premium channel, you know about the Slack channel, but different one, a one where all the writers are in, and Eric mentioned something about this beautiful flag behind me. He said I needed more or less, maybe. I think maybe he was referring to taking it down and putting up something else, but this will stay. And in fact, I've doubled down and I bought a wall decal of Notre Dame to put right here in this white spot. So, Eric, if you're watching, I did find something to fill the additional space. It'll just be more Notre Dame.
I do think the shot should be directed at me because
That's true. That's true. But Eric had the audacity to say something.
Yeah, but I think he's a Notre Dame fan. We'll have to double check in the Slack channel.
All right, I don't know about that, but I think if so, he's been giving me a lot of help for a couple years now.
I don't know.
Notre Dame fan. I don't know.
I'm a Michigan fan, and so I don't want to see that, and I have to see it every week. So I might send you some Bill stuff. I have a box of Bill stuff upstairs that didn't make it to the wall, so maybe I'll send that to you.
You know, though, Eric did send me a picture of a Rudy jersey, as Deuce just mentioned here in the chat. He did send me a picture of a Rudy jersey he almost got on an auction. So maybe he might be an undercover Notre Dame fan or something. I don't know, but
you guys are everywhere. I hate it.
That's true. We're like Yankees fans. We're infesting the world.
Yeah, it's terrible. So we need less of that and more Bills fans. So we got some Bills fans in the chat here. Before we get going today, guys, we are talking about the linebacker position group. We've been just going through the position groups. Obviously, it's a slow news time this time of year. So we're just, taking a look at this roster before we hit in training camp. So if you haven't caught any of the episodes yet, you can check them out over on YouTube or go on iTunes and download all of them and listen to them while whatever it is that you do when you're listening to podcasts. So check that stuff out. As always, go to cover1.net, check out all the fire content. These guys are dropping stuff all the time, man. I love it. Every day I get up and there's something new. Nate, Rob, Fernando, everybody out there. Russ is just dropping stuff all the time. So get over to cover1.net, check it out. And then, Nate, you're a big user of the app. So if you want to fill everybody in on that.
I was actually just going to say, it's not that it reminded me. I know that every Wednesday we do this, but had I not remembered we were about to go on at 7 o'clock, 15 minutes before the show was on, and I was, on the phone. So all of a sudden, bloop, it popped up, and I was like, oh yeah, got the podcast in 15 minutes. So when you have the app, you get little alerts sent right to your phone, and obviously you'll know when to tune in to Eric, Aaron, and I on Wednesday nights. But obviously, when everyone's dropping new content, we brought Rob Quinn along. All of you probably know who Rob is. I don't have to intro him, but Rob's been pumping out work since he came over and had his winter hiatus. He's back in summer mode, and he's throwing up content like crazy. So want to know when Eric's content comes out. Obviously, Eric's big announcement this week, which I think we should.
Yeah, awesome stuff.
Yeah. Eric finally accepting a job, or a part-time job, or at least a contributing job over at The Athletic with a couple of other great writers as well. So congrats to Eric on that huge accomplishment, having a full-time job as well. So the guy's a friggin' warrior. So congrats to Eric. But yeah, no, so there's just a lot of stuff coming out. And if you want to be up to date on it, and you want to have that stuff clicking on your phone whenever you're looking for stuff, that's the thing to do. Obviously, it's up at iTunes, up in the, I don't know, what do you call that? The Google
the App Store and the Google Play Store.
I don't know. I don't mess around with that stuff. I'm on my iPhone. This is a plug iPhone right here.
I thought there would be a picture of you and Josh Rosen on there, but looked like somebody else.
It's actually Josh Elam.
So. Okay. All right. Good to know that you fully come around there. So before we talk, we actually have something to say about Josh Allen, surprisingly, and I think that is going to get brought up pretty much all summer. But before we get into that, like he was talking about the content, I do want to remind everybody right now, $10, you can get premium content
money
for a year. You can barely buy the draft and training camp guides for this cost, and you're going to get the premium content for a year. We've been talking in our private contributor Slack channel about really ramping it up, and you can see it, all the premium content. People will let you know. We're really ramping up that side of things. Even with Eric going to The Athletic, that stuff's not slacking at all. So we're just ramping it up. So go do that, check that out, and let's get right into it, man. Enough of the promo stuff. So your boy Ben Albright, right? said this week, which kind of took me by surprise. One of the sources in the Bills that he talked to stated that it was Josh Allen in a distant third in the QB competition. And we as Bills fans and Bills Twitter and a lot of the local reporters even who were attending camp kind of thought that maybe he was closer in that he was getting some reps and the things that the veterans were saying about him. I mean, we've talked about it here on the podcast. So did that tweet take you by surprise at all? I mean, I know it's OTAs and all that, so we can't make too much of it, but did it take you by surprise that he's that distant?
No, I mean, it did take me by surprise. I think it's the scenario that we all kind of hope is going to play out, but I think we, as I wrote about too, which you can, I'm sure, find up at cover1.net somewhere, is an article I did about, if Peterman's not if Peterman, but in Allen in this case is the guy that they, drafted 7th overall. He's got all the raw tools. He's got all the things that what I talked about, like some of the intangibles those other guys don't have that are in the room, then you'd expect him to be the starter. But I think in the best case scenario, I mentioned Peterman, a little Freudian slip, I guess. He's looking like a player that's pushing for the starting gig right now. All reports, which I think the Twitter mob started going after a lot of guys for why are you, propping up Nathan Peterman, all these gush pieces. I think they're really just reporting on what they're seeing at practice, and what they're seeing is one quarterback who's playing at one level and two that are playing at sort of another level. And I just think that's what they're seeing. I don't think that any media member around here is pumping up, Nathan Peterman more than Josh Allen because they don't like Josh Allen or they love Nathan Peterman. And I think just the facts and just what they looked like, and of course with no pads on, so you have to take that as it is. I mean, what are you going to do? But right. He's on the field and he's performing. Let's see if it, translates over when the pads come on and the training camp lights come on, because I think that's the most important. Is that going to translate when everything starts moving? And obviously one of the people in the chat talked about Wentz. Adam Sheehan says that it's going to be Josh Allen by week 1. He's going to be the Carson Wentz, and maybe. But to be honest with you, I don't see any of the guys at the top of this draft getting early playing time. I might take Evan Silva's bet of 4.5, and I'll take the under, because I really don't think they want Josh Allen to play very much this year.
Yeah, I do think I mentioned it. We did a premium. Rob and I did a premium audio clip for premium subscribers only. I do think it's out now for non-premium subscribers, but we were talking about this a little bit because I think that right now you really got to take almost everything with a grain of salt, whether it's coming from a source or not, just because of it being OTAs. I found it really odd that they said some of the reporters were saying it's clear Peterman has a better grasp of the offense. So much goes into determining who has a better grasp of things. Yes, maybe he was performing better, but it's OTAs. There is a long time to go for training camp.
I think, Aaron, that's a good point too, because I think what a lot of people talked about in terms of grasping the offense is what a lot of things that I heard was that Peterman was the guy who was pulling players aside and showing offensive linemen, showing wide receivers where to be in this offense, as if he already sort of had a grasp of not only his job, but what the job of others. And that's the job of a quarterback, what makes it so difficult. You're being asked to do. You also have to understand and know where players are on the other 10 players are on the field and why they're going to be there. So what people have been talking about and what people have been reporting is that he's been pulling receivers aside and, after he's done with the first team and talking with Kelvin Benjamin and talking to him about alignments and talking to him about nuance and adjustments. And those are things that I think are sticking out to the people who are watching and maybe leading to those reports that he has that better grasp of the offense. And you're right. I mean, that's really the only way you can tell when the pads aren't on. When everything's moving full speed, that's when you really have an understanding of who it is understands the offense.
Sure. And this time of year, I'm not taking a lot of that into consideration. Like I said, training camp's even though for fans, it feels like it goes by very quick, but for the coaches and the players, it is a long grind to get through training camp. So a lot's going to happen there. But I was a little bit surprised that the tweet that I'm referencing said distant third. I thought he was in third and slowly creeping up, but the fact that he said distant kind of shocked me. So definitely, I think something to keep an eye on. And maybe you're right that they just don't plan on him getting much action this first year.
Yeah, I don't suspect what Ben had to say. And let's go on record in saying Ben has a terrific track record in terms of reporting anything Bills related. So it's to note that if anything that Ben says about the quarterback situation is probably in pretty good company. So that aside, I do think that anybody who's who's suggesting that one player is ahead of another, other than based on he's a rookie and we know that he's sort of raw.
Right.
They don't really have anything because, again, you just don't know where they are at this point of the year. He has, and people want to say, well, he's behind the 8 ball a little bit because the other two have been in the room, have been in, at least Peterman. They are all sort of starting at the same time, but obviously in a new scheme under Brian Dable as well. But I guess for me, there's maybe a 2-month difference in Josh Allen and Peterman and Kaiir in this offense. So yeah, I mean, all that stuff's going to matter. But right now, I think anything that suggests he's far away in any position or one guy is ahead of another is really sort of just speculation.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to get this time of year. So we've talked about the quarterback position a lot, and I'm sure, like I said, we're going to talk about it a ton, but we're really here today to talk about the linebacker group. And this one's a really interesting one to me because going into this week and getting ready for this show, I felt a lot more confident in the group than I did once I started digging in a little bit, because once you dig deep outside of, obviously it's easy to get really excited about Tremaine Edmunds. When you see the size, the speed, you watch the highlights, you see what Eric has to say about him and his breakdowns and the draft guides. It's easy to get excited about a guy like that. I think he's going to be, I hate to use the word like generational. I want to be careful throwing out like generational type talents, but I think he could be, him and like Roquan Smith could really change the linebacker position moving forward if they develop into what they're supposed to be. So that's exciting. Milano's exciting, right? A 5th round pick who really came on towards the end of the year, has the athleticism that you want. That's exciting. After that, dude, I'm not excited at all. So are you worried here? What do we got? What are we looking at with this linebacking core?
Yeah, and I mean, you got quoted on that generational, so you better be careful. But from the reviews that you're hearing, not from media members, but from players, guys like Lorenzo Alexander, who have been around great players in this league and for a long time. And you hear some of the other veterans, Jerry
Leslie
Hughes,
Frazier, right?
And Leslie Frazier talk about not only his ability and what he looks like, just his physical structure of being just a physical specimen, is his ability to take what he's learning on the chalkboard and in the classroom and converting it over to the defensive side of the ball during plays. And he's out there, he's quarterbacking that defense. And that's really difficult to do as a 19-year-old guy. Right. So I think he might've turned 20. Did he just turn 20?
So yeah,
something. It's crazy. He's super young. He's 6'5" and 250 and runs a 4.5. Yeah. So of course, like all of those things, but the generational part, I think everybody has talent in the NFL. Yeah. It's what helps you separate yourself from all of that great talent, because there are other guys with the height and weight that Tremaine Edmunds is that are playing that position across the league. There are guys, he's not the only one, but can he be the guy that catapults this defense to the next level and brings the sort of sideline to sideline linebacker that, first of all, the Bills haven't really seen since Darryl Talley, since a guy like that, really? I mean, think about how many legitimate freak athletes they've had at the linebacker position. And they've had stout defenders. They've had the London Fletchers, the Takeo Spikes, but those guys aren't freak athletes that can give you sideline to sideline rotations, can cover slot receivers, and can cover backs, tight ends and running backs. Right, exactly. So you have a guy with all this versatility who never really played the Mike linebacker position per se. He was really sort of projected to be a weak side or a strong side outside linebacker in the NFL. And was he going to be able to play in the 3-4? I think he's fit perfectly in what Sean McDermott wants to do and what Leslie Frazier want to do. I'm super excited about Tremaine Edmunds. There's no doubt about it. And you mentioned Milano as well. And he's another really interesting guy because, I think it was today on Twitter that somebody posted the touchdown, the interception or fumble, whatever you want to call that. I guess it was an interception, return for a touchdown against the Raiders last season. And I thought that play really sort of epitomized that point of the season for the team. They come out, they're 5-2. And of course, you're going to be able to see it right here on this play. And one of the things I loved about Milano is sort of his instincts and what Eric talked about. And Rob Quinn really loved Milano. And it was sort of a joke on Twitter, how much Rob loved Matt Milano coming out of college last year as a prospect and when the Bills drafted him. But he turned out to be maybe their most consistent linebacker last year when he played. And that's kind of what I use the same template as what I think they might do with Josh Allen and what they might do with Tremaine Edmunds. But I really think you see a template of how they treat their young guys. They really brought him along slowly, Matt Milano. They weren't giving him, 60 snaps a game. He was getting 15 early. Then he was getting 20, and he was getting 25, and then the injury happened. And then he was getting, a full game's work, and then he was getting scaled back. So they really allowed him to grow into the position, which I really liked. I don't think they're going to do that with Tremaine Edmunds, though. I think that Tremaine Edmunds is a guy that's going to be really ready right away and be able to be the X factor on the defense. I think he comes in, Tremaine Edmunds. I mean, tell me, is there a maybe Tre'Davious White, but overall defensively, is there a guy that's going to maybe make a bigger impact on this Bills defense than Tremaine Edmunds in 2018?
I don't think so. And that's, the point you made between Milano and then bringing him along versus Edmunds coming in. I mean, that is the difference between a first round pick and a fifth round pick.
Yeah.
You expect that guy to come in, make this impact immediately. And I think he will. And Leslie Frazier even made that comment. I do use the word generational talent carefully. And maybe that's not the right word to use, generational, but it was the only thing that came to my mind at the time. And the reason I say it is because of the things you hear. He made the point of saying, as far as rookies go, as far as the mental processing part of the game of taking what they learn and applying it to practice, that Leslie Frazier said it reminds him of Tre'Davious White, who had a fantastic rookie season at the cornerback position. And then you take that freakish athlete talent that you talked about, being able to cover different positions. And I think he'd throw him into the Bills, who want this very athletic core of linebackers, which obviously Milano came on towards the end of the year, but they didn't start the season with a very athletic linebacking core. And it prevented them from, I think, doing some of the things that they wanted to do. We talk about them being in zone 70% of the time. You really can't survive that way in the NFL. And you saw that in November. Mm-hmm. When they played a string of really good quarterbacks throughout November, and they just got torched, and it really ripped the whole defense apart because you can't do it. You've played quarterback, man. If you have a pretty good average to elite quarterback and you're just playing zone 70% of the time, it's going to make the game way too easy for them. So I think Edmunds and Milano in that starting lineup, if they can stay healthy, give them the ability to play a little bit more mixed defense that they want to, because Edmunds can guard your, ideally you can match him up with some of your better tight ends in league and put them on running backs, where Preston Brown would have just got lost last year.
Absolutely right. And maybe not lost, but he was always a half a step. He was always one step out of the best situation. Do you know what I mean? Right. He was always just that one step behind. And I think that's what ultimately made the Bills say, you know what, as much as we liked what he was able to do for us, he was a leading tackler. He was second in the league in tackles last year.
Sure. Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily, and again, it goes back to saying, stats don't really tell the whole story.
Yeah, those are 5-6 yard down the field tackles.
Right, exactly. And in passing situations, especially in zone. And I do think that Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier, they do want to run a majority of zone. I think they'd like to be more 60%, 60-40 than 70-30. But what Tremaine Edmunds does on top of allowing them to maybe scale back that zone usage, but become more of a more effective zone defense. And because of his height and his athleticism, his ability to move within the hash marks, but outside of them as well, brings an element to that defense in terms of what he can do in zone that a guy like Preston Brown just had no ability to do, because not only can he cover a man up on your running back and on your tight end, he can, of course, drop back in that middle zone. And if they're going to play that deep Tampa 2 and he's going to stand in the middle of the field, you aren't getting crossing routes, or you aren't getting dig routes over the middle of the field. So you're going to be able to see a lot more checkdowns. And I think that's going to be the Tremaine Edmunds effect, is can these good quarterbacks feel comfortable? Because how many guys across the league, I mentioned there are a few guys at the position with his height and weight and his ability and his movement and his speed, but how many of them are right now out in the league right now starting and are freak athletes? There aren't a lot of guys like him. So quarterbacks are going to be wary of testing his height and weight over the middle.
Yeah, and I think a lot of those guys are prospects, raw talent guys that never quite see the field. And obviously he's going to get in and get a chance to really lead this defense. And like you said, he is going to be in the middle of the field. And I think you saw it on a play here a little earlier on this highlight reel where he did drop back into coverage, but because of his athleticism, quarterback goes to, nobody's open, quarterback finds a lane to run. Tremaine Edmunds closes on that lane so fast. So he brings some of that stuff that you just couldn't see out of the Bills linebacking core last year. And when there was a stretch of time where it was Humber and Brown and Alexander, and nothing against Lorenzo, he's still got a lot left in the tank, but that was maybe at times the least athletic linebacking core that I saw last year in the league. And the game is just not that game anymore. And I don't think you can have that.
Yeah, that's right. And me and Eric have talked about this multiple times. And he mentioned, I think when we were talking about the defensive line last week in the chat and talked about, they're gonna test him and they're gonna let Lorenzo Alexander rush the passer more. They're going to put him in 3 technique situations at defensive tackle on 3rd down. They're going to have him with his hand on the ground as a, defensive end at times. That's just what they're going to do with him. So I could see them running a lot of zone. And that's what I was talking about, maybe him being what Tremaine Edmonds brings in terms of effectiveness running zone is maybe you run more nickel looks, and maybe that's Taron Johnson. Maybe they like Taron Johnson. Maybe they like Phillip Gaines, one of these guys as an effective tackler in situations where, we want to run as our base defense in nickel. We want to be running nickel 65% of the time, dime, 10%, and, maybe sprinkling in some 4-3 looks, traditional 4-3 looks, some overlooks, some underlooks. And, I think that maybe that could be the case this year. But again, you mentioned the biggest case in this whole thing and the biggest sort of X factor is them staying healthy. Those are 2 good young players. I think that the Bills have a really nice, bright future. I think that strong side linebacker long-term needs to be looked at and considered hard at. There's going to be guys available next year in free agency. And as we know, this is a defense too. And of course, Eric brings in too the Buffalo nickel, Siran Neal, a guy that they obviously drafted this year. He could be a guy that sees time in big nickel looks, especially against the run. So that's a great point that Eric brought up, and I'm glad that he added that in there.
Yeah, that is something I did want to bring up here too, is talk about Siran Neal and how he'll be used, because when he was drafted, he had mentioned that he talked to Babich, who I love Babich and I love what he's done throughout his career with linebackers. But I found that interesting that he talked to Babich as coming out as a defensive back. So that tells me that they're scheming some type of way. And like Eric said, they have that Buffalo nickel kind of installed. And that's great news, because I look at that strong side position right now, and there isn't anyone on the roster.
Yeah, just Lorenzo Alexander. I mean, he's the only guy that.
Yeah, you have other guys, but they're special teamers, right? Like they're not guys that are going to see 500 snaps this year on defense.
Absolutely not. Right. I mean, and I think you're probably sitting pretty if Lorenzo Alexander's playing 25 snaps at strong side. And even maybe that's a little much, because I think obviously he's your best special teams player. So he's going to contribute there. And as I mentioned, he's going to get a lot of snaps as a pass rusher on 3rd down and pass rushing situations. But interestingly enough, and Frank brings up Michael Kendricks. Yeah, he ends up signing with Cleveland, unfortunately, because I thought that would have made a ton of sense for the Bills to bring in a guy like Michael Kendricks. But he obviously was going to a team that was going to pay him a pretty nice penny. I don't know that the Bills were going to be that team.
Yeah, no, I do think that they might look to address that side of the linebacking core and just the depth of the linebacking core overall, because I've heard arguments that there is good depth here because, Humber played okay at times last year, but I do not like this depth at all. I don't think that the depth fits. So, like, say Matt Milano goes down, you're going to have to run an entirely toned back defense from what Frazier and McDermott are really going to want to run, because you lose so much athleticism right away by Humber coming in. And obviously Humber's going to get some time. He's going to get some snaps. So you're going to have him in. But if you lose one of these super athletic guys, there's a huge drop off in both talent and athleticism. I mean, Vallejo has shown some athleticism, but let's be honest.
He's small.
Small dude and primarily a special teams player. So we don't know what to expect out of there. So the depth, man, is super concerning at this position, because it is a marathon season. Somebody's going to get hurt along the way.
Absolutely. And a lot of times 2 guys get hurt. And, you saw what happened with Kiko Alonso. I mean, has a great rookie season, and then he's gone for the second season, just like that. And it can happen that fast. So, and obviously they do have decent depth. Humber's the guy you mentioned, but it's a huge step down. And you mentioned the biggest area, and that's athleticism. And that's sort of why he was sort of phased out after looking so good in the preseason, understanding and grasping what they were asking him to do on defense. But at the end of the day, the talent and the athleticism played out, and Matt Milano was able to, once he had the same grasp that Humber had. And obviously Humber's just had years in the league. He's going to understand what pro concepts are quicker than a guy who's coming from Boston College, who hasn't played the position for a very long time. So you saw when the knowledge of the defense were sort of similar, that's when Milano started to take the majority of the snaps, because he just had that edge and athleticism. So can they everyone stay healthy? Let's hope, because I think that's the big key here. But I think the conversation in terms of what they do at strong side is maybe the most interesting thing about this defense. I think it's the most, at this point, the most glaring weakness of this defense, maybe right outside of slot nickel corner. Like that, to me, that is the the most glaring weakness of this defense. I think Doug Whaley, holy cow. I saw him in the news today. That's why. What I think really well has sort of reestablished this team as a trenches first team, a guy that has tons of depth up front. We talked about the defensive line last week, and if you missed that episode, of course, go to cover1.net. But I guess my point here is they've allowed their linebackers to develop not only the young guys, Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds, but maybe to have depth players back there elevate their game because they won't have the sort of easy blocking. I mean, you talk about last year, the defensive line just didn't have a lot of great gap stuffers up front, guys that are going to take up blocks up the middle. Star Lotulelei, that's what he was brought in for. Harrison Phillips, that's what he did in college. So you're in Trent Murphy, who I think is going to be a great run defender for this defense. You talk about all those players, and you're going to see these linebackers running free a little bit more. And that's going to be huge for Tremaine Edmonds, but more so huge for depth players who are going to be thrust into injury positions where if they're forced to play on a team with a bad defensive line, they're going to really, their weaknesses are then amplified.
Right. No, that's a great point that you bring up too, because that's one of the things I don't love about breaking down these position groups by in individual silos, because
a lot of times they overlap.
They overlap and they impact each other, right? So, like you said, if these guys are clogging up run lanes and things like that, that only helps the linebackers. So it's a lot of the times around the league, good linebacking play is dependent on good defensive line play, and good defensive back plays dependent on good defensive line play, and vice versa. So it's hard to break them down to silos. So I'm glad you brought up that point. To the point Eric made about Siran Neal, we're looking at a 5th round pick from a small school, a guy that doesn't have a lot for fans to really know a lot about him, except for a couple highlight tapes. A guy like me who just loves defensive backs watches those highlight tapes, and I get super excited because he, even though it's a small school, is a super physical guy. He loves to get in, hit, but obviously love to see him wrap up a little bit more. Obviously he's going to need to at the next level. But we saw a 5th round pick last year, obviously at a bigger school, Boston College, come in and be able to handle his own in this league. Can we expect anything out of Siran Neal in year one? Because he, to me, seems like more of a project special teams player. But if they're doing this Buffalo nickel, this big nickel package, I think that's like the kind of guy. Yeah, it seems like the right fit. Is this something that he can transition in year one?
Yeah, I just mentioned in the chat, this is sort of Siran Neal, I think, was a poor man's Fred Warner, because I really wanted Fred Warner for that sort of role for this defense, sort of the big nickel or the Buffalo nickel, as Eric kindly put it. But yeah, I think he's really the one guy that makes sense in that position. They don't really have another athletic guy that can play the Brian Scotts. Okay, these guys that play, they don't necessarily have a position. They're a hybrid, but they don't necessarily have that on there. But I look at what they want to do defensively, and I think that's the natural position, right? Like, they need to fill that position. And the one thing I look at with Siran Neal is he's playing at a small school, so is that going to translate? Because that to me is the biggest thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's same with me, right? I don't know what type of level of talent that he's going to be able to come in and play with. I know Eric was at the Senior Bowl. I know that he did handle his own in some of the drills, pressing guys and making guys feel uncomfortable at the Senior Bowl. So that's a good sign for him. I would like to see a little bit more, and that's one of the things I'm really excited for training camp, is to see more of what his role is going to be. Is he going to be in that, kind of linebacking, big nickel? Is he going to be a backup safety type of guy? Because he's played all over in college. He played a little bit of quarterback, a little bit of safety. He's obviously a special teamer. So where is he going to go? And I do think, though, if they get him with Babbage, I think Babbage really can maximize a guy, and that we might be able to get something out of him in year one. That's my overly optimistic Bills fan talking. But I think he might be able to get in, and you can hide him a little bit in the defense.
And what Eric just said too is I think if he's going to have a prominent role, I think it'll be definitely towards the end of the season, just like Matt Milano. Like, they're going to slowly bring him along until he understands sort of what they're asking him to do. You're right, though. Like, 2 tight end teams, right, as Eric says, is definitely going to be options for him, because I think he brings that sort of mismatch, or the ability to get off of mismatches. But this is where you're going to see it. Right here is on special teams. That's where he's going to make his role. at least for his rookie season. And that's a position they desperately needed, the gunner position. They needed somebody a little bit more responsible than they had last year. Their special teams were bad last year, the Bills, but because I think it's a big area for this coaching staff. They take special teams very seriously. So I think Sierra Neal, that's how he's going to get the start. I don't know that he's going to see a lot of that look. I don't think you'll see him on defense too much. If you do, I think you might have bigger problems.
Yeah, I mean, but you never know. And I think that one thing that I'm happy with this coaching staff so far is their ability to find players that they think will fit in this system. They got Matt Milano in the 5th round last year. Obviously, Eric and Rob are high on him. I didn't hear much about him outside of those two. So I think they find guys that fit what they're trying to do, and they might have feel like they have somebody. I didn't hear anything about him in OTAs, so I'm going to reserve a little bit of judgment until we get to training camp. Yeah. But outside of that, man, I don't have really anything to be excited for this back half of the middle linebacking group. So we talked a little bit about they're probably going to look for some guys. How many guys, because we've talked about this at every position group, how many guys do you think they keep? What do we have? I think there's 8 or 9 right now, linebackers. I'll look it up, but I think there's like 8 or 9 of them right now on the roster. What's their sweet spot this year for the linebacking position?
I guess it depends. Is can Vallejo play inside and out?
Right now, I think he's listed as inside.
He is listed as inside because I just don't think they have anybody else that can really play the Mike position. It's same with strong side. They don't have multiple guys that can play the strong side. They've got a few weak side guys, obviously, as we noted with Humber. But yeah, ideal world, they'd probably like to carry 5. Most rosters are going to carry 6 guys, 7 guys. Obviously, 3-4 teams are going to carry an extra linebacker. But I would bet they probably keep 6. But again, if Vallejo can be a guy that plays multiple positions for them, maybe that gives them roster flexibility.
Yeah.
For a guy like Sierra Neal. So that even though Sierra Neal isn't dressing as a safety, maybe he's dressing as the 6th linebacker.
Yeah, and Eric says Zoe has been practicing inside as well, which is going to be huge. I think Zoe's going to have that type of versatility at this point in his career to be able to put his hand in the ground, rush the passer. If something happens with Edmonds injury-wise or whatever, just needs a break for a guy to be able to bump in. Because like you said, I don't know what to expect out of Vallejo. He's undersized. I think my projection for him as far as his career is just a special teamer, very depth guy. And then you look at these other guys. I don't even know who Xavier Woodson-Lester is.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I expect him to make the roster. I agree with you, though. I think it'll be somewhere 5 and 6, but I think 2 of the guys might not even be on this roster yet. I just don't know. That's that fair. Julian Stanford, Luster, Corey Thompson, guys like this, Deion Lacey. I don't know that these guys end up making the 53.
Maybe Deion Lacey. He's been around. He at least knows the defense. But I think you're right. I think this team's going to be searching at the. I almost wish, because I was going to say they might be searching at the wide receiver position. I wish that we sort of knew a little bit more what we knew a couple weeks ago when we did the wide receivers, and you weren't there for the wide receivers, were you?
I might not have been. No, I was.
You were here for the wide receivers. We didn't talk enough about Malachi Dupree, but that's kind of not that I think Julie Stanford or Deion Lacey are those guys, but I'm just saying, I guess there's going to be guys that are coming off of other rosters. Malachi Dupree stuck out to me because that's what happened to the Bills. He came off for another roster from an injury in Green Bay. But for me, is there another guy that can come in and potentially help them? Maybe, but I just think linebacker is sort of turned into offensive linemen, where there are a handful of really good ones, then there's the league average, and then after that there is a huge drop off in what they can provide you. There might be 35 overall in this league, that guys that can really play the position, and there's a significant drop off after that. So yeah, even if you get somebody from another team, how much are they really going to benefit you? You'd have to get a team who has just absolutely loaded at the linebacker position. Dallas sticks out. Maybe somebody falls off from Dallas, but I don't know. That's what you got to hope for.
Yeah, obviously age and contracts. I don't know. I'd have to look around the league a little bit, but I do think, and this might be a bad take that will come back and bite me in the butt. So somebody write it down and then hit me up on Twitter. Old takes exposed or whatever. I think, to me, I would rather see urgency to find more depth at the linebacker position than I would see would want urgency at the wide receiver position right now today. I just think I'm not as down on the wide receivers as a lot of people are.
Obviously, either is Brandon Beane. So
I don't think they put the priority on that position. I do think that they want to. I like where they're going with the linebacker position. I think that they would like to do something kind of like you mentioned, similar to the defensive line, where they build a lot more depth into that position so that next year they can get one more starter and have depth behind it.
Yep.
So that to me is a priority right away as soon as guys start falling off rosters.
And I agree, especially this year, but next year too. I think linebacker is one of those positions they really need to address in the draft next year and free agency next year. But somebody mentioned it, I think, here in the chat about the Chiefs model right now. And I look at the Chiefs model as they had the quarterback that they were sort of paying a lot of money to. They drafted a guy high like Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, sat the whole year, did not play one game last year, came in towards the end of the season when, they were already out of the playoff race. But they add a ton. First of all, they had more talent than the Bills do right now already on the roster, but they add Sammy Watkins. So next year you have $80 million in salary cap space. I think that's where maybe they start to add some weapons around Josh Allen, and maybe they add a nice linebacker, a starting, caliber linebacker at the strong side position in free agency, considering your other two linebackers are on rookie contracts. Mm-hmm. And then your top defender potentially in Trey White's on a rookie contract. And your best starting safety, who is, and really have two good starting safeties who are making incredibly team-friendly amounts of money. And you start to look around and you're like, okay, let's get through this year, and I think maybe a lot of us are going to have a tendency to look at this year as maybe like I did last year, where I thought the Browns are going to be better than the Bills last year. And I still think that this year, and I don't think I really have that much of a different feel than I did last year. But I look at the wide receiver position, like Eric just mentioned, it's like Malachi Dupree is going to be a player for this team, I think. Brandon Beane mentioned him first when he was on with on GR, I think, last week. That was the first name out of his mouth, was Malachi Dupree. And that, to me, says something about what Brandon Beane's not – he didn't really mention guys like Rod Streeter. He mentioned Malachi Dupree, and he mentioned – who was the other guy he mentioned? Foster, Reuben Foster. So he mentioned those two guys by name on the radio when they asked about the depth of the position. So that should say something to you. Maybe he doesn't think that they're as far behind as everybody else does, but I agree with you with the linebacker. I almost value them having to upgrade that position before the wide receivers.
Yeah, well, especially right now, right away, because I do think defense is going to carry this team if they are trying to win now, which they are going to continue to say. They're going to say we're trying to win now and build for the future, just like they did last year. So I do think that it's going to be a priority. To your point about Kansas City, I've been comparing the Bills this year to the Bears a year ago. Bears go get Mitch Trubisky. Obviously, he comes in because Glennon just played so horribly. I don't think the plan was to play Trubisky. They wanted to let him sit. Obviously, he came into a situation where he had to. It was just terrible football all season long. Bears go out and load up on talent. I do think that is what the Bills are going to try to do this next season with all the cap space. This is a conversation we'll have to have for another episode. We're going to have to look ahead because I don't know that. I think that they may have gotten a healthy cap a year too late, and we'll have to see what actually shakes free for crazy talent. But I do think that
this year's not there wasn't a lot this year in terms of free agency. So
but the Bears got it all right. So they had the money, they went out and they got everyone they possibly could to put Trubisky in a position to succeed right away.
Right, and same with, and we talked about Kansas City, like those two teams surrounded their rookie quarterbacks with really good talent offensively in a year that there wasn't a ton of great talent. Next year, that's going to be a great year for Brandon Beane to have $80 million flush and be able to say, okay, well, I have a top first-round pick. Maybe I trade back a couple of spots if I've got the second or third or first overall pick. Maybe I trade back, get some more assets, build to the draft, have $80 million, and you're looking at like the Browns with all of a sudden you're like, wow, I'm sort of stacked at all these positions because we've continued doing this. So there's going to be opportunities to add to the linebacker position. As Frank says, I can't wait. I'm feeling very good. And that, listen, I've been getting into it a little bit on Twitter. I don't know if you noticed about this, Aaron, but
you did?
I got into it a little bit with Evan Silva about this because Evan, I like Evan a lot. I like his work. He definitely has some Bills hate going on. He's got some Bills mafia running through his blood that he doesn't want to accept and doesn't want to be open with. But that's okay. He's a closet Bills fan. Some of us,
the Bills did something to him as a child.
That's right.
Yeah.
He must have the Super Bowl loss. The Norwood kick must have hurt him or something. But what I was frustrated with is how you could look at this team in a 3 to 5 year forecast with the flexibility that Brandon Beane's created by getting rid of some of the worst contracts on this team of guys that weren't flowing with what this general manager and this coach want. And I don't think, much as people have been critical about Sean McDermott and his game day, his fourth downs, his field goals, bullshit. That stuff comes. It comes. He's a first-year head coach. He got more. What I walked away most impressed about last year was how McDermott got more out of a roster that no one else really wanted. No one else would have really taken the Bills roster last year. Okay, I know I wasn't. So I was taking the Browns roster, and they won one game. So, like, I just look at this, and I see a guy who got more out of so much less than everybody else. He's going to probably have to do that again this year. Can he squeak 9 wins out? That would be the Lord's work. If he could do that, I'd say his name's almost ready to go up on the board if he can get squeak 9 wins out of the roster that he has this year. But I guess for me, at the end of the day, the flexibility in the 3 to 5 year outlook is so great for this team in terms of money, in terms of draft capital. I just don't know how you could look at the Bills and say that they're not set up to be successful if right decisions are made.
Oh, yeah. I've never, as an adult Bills fan that understands football more. When I was a kid, I was just a fan running around outside pretending to be the guys. But now as an adult, I've never been in a position where I have more trust in the future. I'm totally fine. I agree. I think there might be a regression this year, but I'm totally content with that. They've gotten the monkey off their back as far as getting to the playoffs last year. I was shocked that happened. So they've already got that lifted. No pressure there. Go ahead, take a season. They had to get this cap healthy. They had to do some things with talent. They got a lot of young talent on the books, like you said. That's really one of the most important things. Supposedly, hopefully, they have the quarterback of the future on a rookie deal for the next 5 years. Another big thing when you look at teams of success outside of the Aaron Rodgers and Brady teams. So let's just pump the brakes on saying that this team is dysfunctional, Brandon Beane's dysfunctional, because what they did was they came into a dysfunctional situation from a really a 5 year window of dysfunction with the Marone, the death of Ralph Wilson, that whole transfer. That this team had been a spiraling dysfunction. Rex didn't help it at all. Whaley didn't help it at all. And that stuff takes time. When those guys got hired, I got a little bit killed on Twitter for saying we need to give them a full 5 years. Yeah. And people said, you don't do that in the NFL these days. They have to do it in 3 years. And I think they will. I think the progression will be there in the 3 years. But I think that I'm totally happy that these guys are on the same page, building something for the future. Give them the full 5 years. And I think that you're going to see a really big leap into success in the next 2 to 3 seasons.
I'm here with that, man. Sorry, we had to get that out.
Yeah, I was preaching. I'm sorry.
No, we had to. We had to get it out. I know it was a linebacker day, but we had some demons to kill, and I'm glad we were able to do it because it's just frustrating because I don't like sounding like a Billsy, like I'm a homer. It's just at the end of the day, what it is looking at their situation long term. I just don't know how anybody could look at 2 first-round picks this year that they were able to keep somehow and yet still move up in the first round to get the quarterback that they felt they wanted all along. And say what you will, say they're dumb for thinking Josh Allen was the pick. It doesn't matter. They've done the work. They feel confident in the pick. They traded up and do it. So let's let it happen. That's what I say.
Yeah. So I do think that people need to just be patient.
Linebackers.
Yeah, linebackers. Same thing that I've been telling people with receivers, though. Let's be patient. There is plenty of time, I think, for guys to shake off rosters. We're going to see some names they don't expect to shake off rosters somewhere. And I think if it's a fit.
Of the world.
Sure. And Sammy Watkins ended up, I remember being away on vacation in the summer and Sammy Watkins gets traded, right? Yep. Ronald Darby's gone. So not that that's a move that you can say happens every year, but things are going to happen. There's still plenty of time for these things to happen. And Brandon Beane has shown that he's not scared to make moves when they think the move is right for the team in the future. So I'd expect that they're going to be exercising every possible way to add talent to this team that makes sense for the future, not just right away. So let's just pump the brakes on what we think they need and just, I hate to say it, but trust the process.
Absolutely. Trust the process.
Yeah, man. So what do you got coming out, man? Let us know. What are you working on?
So I've been working on this one piece for a couple days. I was going to try to push it out this week. I think I'm going to wait till next week, but I basically talking a lot about how much further along the defense is at this point than the offense and what that might mean in terms of an outlook of what fans can expect next year to see come game day. Like, what does that really look like when a defense is as far ahead as this offense is projected to be. And of course, we know the Bills defense was projected to be really bad last year. The defensive backs were projected by numbers to be really bad last year, and they turned out to be pretty darn good. So, good. That you have to take all that in a grain of salt. To me, it's going to really be about who is playing quarterback and how this offense can start to maybe outpace its what its projections are. So that's what I'll be coming out with. It's probably going to come out next week, Wednesday or Thursday.
Awesome, man. Well, and where can people find you if they're listening for the first time and have no idea who Nate Kaiir? I wouldn't expect that. That would be really weird, but let us know.
If you don't know, now you know. Right. But you can follow me on Twitter at Nate Geary. It's Geary, which you can see in the chat if you're in the chat. WGR. You can check me out there. Whoa! Vance Reed just made it. Whoa!
Hey, that is not the first time that I've been asked that.
Yes, and it won't be the last, I bet, because
I have one on the way.
That's what I was say. You've got one in the oven, so that makes sense. But you can follow me on Twitter. I will try to always tweet back at you as long as you have nice things to say. And if you have bad things to say, I'll definitely tweet back at you. So don't worry about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously we have a ton of content coming out. I know Rob's been working crazy. I think Rob and I are going to do something a little bit later this week here, maybe Friday, a quick hit audio. So if you're not a premium subscriber, go sign up for premium. Again, it's $10 for the year. It's really a deal you can't beat. You get stuff like that, access to conversations that we're having, access to all the premium content, the film room library. Eric's starting a series of exclusive film room group work, so kind of showing you how he breaks down tape, which is great stuff, and all that for $10 for the whole season. So jump on in at cover1.net, go find the premium link. I don't know how long he's running that deal for, because he could pull it at any time. I think it's just a limited time offer, so I'll find out. So next podcast I can let you guys know when that runs up, but definitely get over there because the Slack channel itself is worth the $10. That is a fun group of dudes. They challenge me all the time with different questions that they put out, kind of what you think. And it's all, a lot of it's, questions for Eric about the X's and O's, but then some of it is just general Bills chat, historical stuff. What do you think about, we were having a conversation the other day about what would be your, all-time coaches, like who would be your head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator in the chat. And that's just a fun thing to be a part of. So get over there, obviously get over to install the app on your phone. And one last thing that we don't touch on, obviously Eric is now with the Athletics. So definitely get over. I think this is huge for the Buffalo market. It's a great team that they've assembled over there. I'm excited to see the stuff Eric's doing over there. If you haven't checked it out, go check out what Eric's got.
And that's a great deal right now. I think I got it for the full year for $53.
Yeah, dude. It's like $2 a month.
Yeah,
sounds like
easy money. Yeah,
it's really a no-brainer, and they're going to be pumping out great content all year. And I'm looking forward to some of maybe like the stuff that they work on together, any type of collaborations. And I think it's only going to advance to the Cover One network. So stay tuned. And if you're a premium member, just get ready, man. We are going to be blasting out some content. So next week we're going to be going over the defensive backs. Again, if this is your first time listening to us, obviously go subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review, all that good stuff. But go back and check it out because we started with the offense and are working our way through the defense. So there's plenty of content if you haven't caught up. During this time of year, there's not a lot of content out. So go catch up. You can look at the videos and watch Nate's hair grow week to week.
And then cut, and then I cut it. And now it's back on I'm going back for the long look.
Right. So you can watch that progress, but then you get to listen to it all. And then join us next week. Again, we go live Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Join us, and we're going to be talking about the defensive back, something that, I think that's going to be a really fun conversation.
Yep.
And so we appreciate you guys. We really can't do it without you. So come on back next week, and we'll be talking about the defensive backs, and go Bills.